Somewhere in a law department office in lower Manhattan City, attorneys are working through a legal question no American city has ever had to answer. Can the mayor of New York arrest a sitting foreign head of government the moment his motorcade rolls off the tarmac? That mayor is Zohran Mamdani. The target of the question is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And the clock isn't measured in hours, it's measured in weeks, 10 of them. Because in September, during the UN General Assembly's high-level week, Netanyahu says he's coming to New York to speak, just like he did last year. Only this time, there's a warrant with his name on it. Signal number 1. This isn't a new threat. It's an old promise, resurfacing at the worst possible moment for everyone involved. Back in December 2024, Mamdani, then just a mayoral candidate, was asked directly whether he'd welcome Netanyahu to the city. His answer was blunt. As mayor, he said, New York City would arrest him. That was a campaign soundbite. Now Mamdani actually runs the city. And on Saturday, in a New York Times podcast interview, he didn't walk it back. He said he still believes Netanyahu belongs in The Hague. He called him a war criminal charged by the International Criminal Court. Then he added something more careful than his 2024 self would have said. He said it's an active conversation with his legal department. Not a promise, a conversation. Here's what nobody explains clearly enough. Why does the ICC even have a warrant out for the leader of a country that isn't part of the ICC? On November 21st, 2024, ICC pretrial chamber judges in The Hague issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The charges: war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, including starvation as a method of warfare and intentionally directing attacks against civilians, stretching back to at least October 8th, 2023. Israel rejected the court's jurisdiction outright. It isn't a signatory to the Rome Statute, the treaty that created the ICC. Neither is the United States. That last detail matters more than almost anything else in this story, because the Rome Statute binds 124 countries to arrest ICC fugitives who set foot on their soil. The United States isn't one of them. Legally, Netanyahu can fly into JFK's, and nothing in American federal law forces anyone to touch him. That's the gap Mamdani is trying to find a way through. Not federal law, city authority. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. New York's own governor has already told him no. Governor Kathy Hochul has said publicly that the mayor doesn't have the legal authority to arrest a visiting head of government. Congressman Jerry Nadler, a New York Democrat, called the whole idea unrealistic, and said flatly that the city has no jurisdiction to do it. So why is Mamdani still talking about it 10 weeks out, instead of just admitting it's dead on arrival? Because there's a second layer to this that most coverage skips entirely. And it's the shocking detail nobody explains until it's almost too late to matter. New York isn't just a city. It's the headquarters of the United Nations. And that changes everything about who has the power to stop Netanyahu from walking through those doors. Under the 1947 UN Headquarters Agreement, the United States, as host country, has binding obligations to allow accredited representatives of UN member states to access the headquarters district, even leaders Washington personally despises. This isn't theoretical. It's happened before. Iranian presidents have traveled to New York for the General Assembly for years, under some of the harshest U.S. sanctions on the planet, because the headquarters agreement effectively overrides ordinary entry restrictions for that narrow purpose. So even if a New York City police officer wanted to make an arrest, the second Netanyahu's plane touched down, accredited state representatives on official UN business generally carry diplomatic immunity while they're here for that purpose. That's the treaty wall Mamdani is up against. Not just Hochul, not just Nadler. A 1947 international agreement that the mayor of New York didn't write and can't unwrite. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, made sure to say so publicly. He accused Mamdani of stoking hostility instead of confronting anti-Semitism, and insisted nothing will change. That Netanyahu will walk into that General Assembly hall with his head held high in September. Exactly as planned. Netanyahu himself didn't stay quiet either. On a radio interview back home, he waved off the threat entirely. He turned it around on Mamdani, accusing him of siding with Hamas and condemning the one democracy standing in the region, rather than condemning the militant group behind the October 7th attacks. That's the internal friction running underneath this whole story. It isn't just Israel versus the ICC. It's Mamdani versus his own governor. It's a progressive mayor versus members of his own party in Congress. It's a symbolic legal threat versus the hard machinery of federal treaty obligations that nobody in City Hall controls. Now here's the second pivot, and it's the one that should worry Netanyahu more than anything happening in Manhattan. New York isn't the only place this warrant follows him, and the precedents from other countries are not encouraging for Team Netanyahu. In April 2025, Netanyahu flew into Hungary, an ICC member state legally obligated to arrest him. Hungarian authorities didn't. Prime Minister Viktor Orban let him walk. Then Orban announced Hungary would withdraw from the Rome Statute entirely. That withdrawal formally took effect in June 2026. ICC judges later ruled that Hungary had failed to comply with its legal obligations. The court referred that finding to its oversight body. The oversight body noted it and did essentially nothing else. That's the uncomfortable pattern underneath every one of these warrants. Enforcement depends entirely on the political will of whoever's standing in the room when the plane lands. Compare that to Vladimir Putin. After the ICC issued a warrant against him over alleged war crimes in Ukraine, Putin quietly stopped attending summits in countries that might actually enforce it. He skipped the BRICS summit in South Africa in 2023. Months later, Mongolia, an ICC member, let him visit anyway and made no attempt at an arrest. 2 warrants, 2 heads of state, 2 different countries just deciding not to follow through. So if Hungary didn't arrest him and Mongolia didn't arrest Putin, why would anyone expect New York City to do what 2 sovereign ICC member states already declined to do? That's exactly the bet Netanyahu and his government seem to be making. And it's probably the safer bet, legally speaking, given that the US isn't even bound by the treaty in the first place. But politically, the bet is riskier than it looks. This is playing out against a Trump administration that has escalated its own fight with the court. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has vowed to dismantle the ICC altogether, accusing it of waging a legal war against the United States. That puts Washington's federal posture and a Democratic mayor's local posture on a collision course, with Netanyahu's travel plans sitting right in the middle. Here's what nobody is telling you plainly enough. Nothing about this actually threatens to keep Netanyahu out of the country. The headquarters agreement almost certainly protects his access to deliver his UN speech, the same way it protected sanctioned Iranian leaders for years. What it does threaten is something else entirely. Spectacle. Protests outside the General Assembly building, a mayor publicly musing about handcuffs on television, whether or not he can legally use them, Israeli officials forced to spend diplomatic capital rebutting a mayor instead of focusing on ceasefire talks, hostage negotiations, or reconstruction funding for Gaza. That's the real domino effect here, and it isn't military. It isn't a stock market number pulled from nowhere. It's reputational and political. Every week this story stays alive, it forces Israeli diplomats back onto defense, forces American officials to defend a court they're simultaneously trying to dismantle, and forces Mamdani to either back down publicly or push a legal theory his own governor has already rejected. And there's a domino most people miss entirely. Other ICC member states are watching how this plays out. If a global spotlight event like the UN General Assembly produces nothing but statements and no enforcement, it hands ammunition to every government, Hungary included, that wants to argue the ICC's warrants are symbolic at best, unenforceable at worst. That's a bigger problem for the court itself than it is for Netanyahu. So where does this actually land in the next 72 hours, and where does it land in the next 10 weeks? In the short term, nothing changes. No arrest, no confrontation, no legal filing. Just a mayor's office and a foreign ministry sizing each other up in public through interviews and statements, while lawyers quietly do the real work out of camera range. In the long term, this comes down to one binary choice that has almost nothing to do with New York City law and everything to do with politics. Mamdani either finds a genuinely enforceable legal lever inside the narrow gap the headquarters agreement leaves open, however small it might be, or he doesn't. And Netanyahu walks into that General Assembly hall in September exactly the way Danny Danon promised he would, head held high, warrant and all. One version ends in a diplomatic incident that reshapes how the ICC's authority is treated inside the country that hosts the United Nations. The other ends in nothing happening at all, and a symbolic threat quietly expiring the moment the cameras move on. Deal or no deal isn't the choice here. Enforcement or symbolism is. And in 10 weeks, the whole world will be watching to see which one New York actually delivers.